All right, hello everybody. My name is Jeremy Fletcher. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a little software company called Ledgerama, and we're hosting this meetup here, this Hedera Savannah Meetup on behalf of basically on the good graces of Creative Coast. Creative Coast here in Savannah, Georgia, is the organization that hosts entrepreneurs and creatives in the area. Create, Code, and Collide is the tagline there. So it's an organization designed for entrepreneurs, techies, and creatives in the Savannah, Georgia area to get together and support one another in all their business, technology, and all the endeavors that come along with being a startup and an entrepreneur. So I want to give first off, want to give a big shout out to Caitlin Lance and Jen Bonet of Creative Coast. They've always been right there helping Ledgerama and Hedera Hashgraph helping us represent here in the Savannah, Georgia area. So we really appreciate all the effort that's come from Creative Coast. I would like to thank my my partner and CTO of Ledgerama, Rob Keynes, for being here to field any of the deep dive technical questions. Rob and I have been working together since on and off, basically since October of 2018, but we really got started in earnest back in January of 2020. So we've been really cooking with gas since early in 2020. Hi Ben, welcome. Glad to see you. So much appreciation for Rob being here. I know he's a busy guy, but he's here to help field any questions, technical stuff that might come from the audience. And as I said, my name is Jeremy Fletcher, co-founder of Ledgerama, along with Rob Keynes there. And Ledgerama, so our most recent development is Walla Wallet. Walla Wallet is a cryptocurrency wallet designed by and for the HBAR enthusiast community. So HBAR is the native cryptocurrency of Hedera Hashgraph. Hedera Hashgraph promises to be the trust layer of the internet. Rob and I have been following Hedera Hashgraph and have been intimately involved in the tech, so to speak, and the project since 2018. And it's been quite a journey. And so we released Walla Wallet, which is the HBAR wallet. We released the Android version in September of 2020, and then the iOS version was November 30th. So really, December was when it really started cooking, and we've been providing services and helping out folks in the HBAR enthusiast community ever since. So I saw Michael Llewellyn pop in, so I'll give a quick hello to Michael Llewellyn, and many thanks for your joining us, Michael. Michael is is a member of the Texas Blockchain Council. He's also the CEO of a really cool company called Tarski Technologies, and he's been involved in all kinds of blockchain stuff since really early on. He's really one of those kind of tech wizards, and has just been entrenched in the industry from very early on. And it's got some really funny, cool stories about the blockchain space and just a wealth of knowledge. So we're really happy to be joined by Michael Llewellyn as well. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, so just briefly about Ledgerama. So like I said, we released Walla Wallet. Our goal as a company is to build trust online, and that's quite a large goal, but we've got big dreams. Part of our goal of building this trust online is essentially providing ways for people to transmit value in a trustworthy environment. So we feel that HBAR, that is the token, the native cryptocurrency on Hedera Hashgraph, we believe that is an excellent form of value, or the cryptocurrency, a way of exchanging value with one another. And we built Walla Wallet for people to be able to use HBAR and exchange them, send, store, and receive, and all those kinds of things. So that's enough about Ledgerama, Creative Coast, all of us. So I will go ahead. Let's see. So just as a side note, while we're also working on some things that are geared towards helping artists locally. So Walla Wallet and Ledgerama, and we're working on some things to improve the environment locally for artists and influencers. We're looking at some use cases for the Hedera token service and a couple other things, but those will all come to light at some point, if not in this conversation tonight, at some point in the future. So So since I really kind of got the idea of doing a tech deep dive from Ben, because Ben said in the Tech SAV channel, he said that he'd like to get do a little bit more of a techie deep dive into some distributed ledger technology. So rather than start it off myself, I mean, I've got a whole slew of questions lined up, but rather than kick it off myself, I think I'd like to hand it off for a minute. And Ben, if you don't mind, maybe introducing yourself, just saying hello, maybe talk a little bit about what your interests are in the community, and kick us off with a question for some of our pros here.
Thanks, Jeremy, Rob,
Yeah, sure.
Michael. Thanks for making the time to be here. I don't know if how last minute this was, but it came up in conversation on the Slack. So personally, we moved to Savannah about 6 weeks ago now from California, just south of the Silicon Valley in Monterey Bay. Worked for a small machine learning company that we just basically work with some larger companies, but blockchain has been an interest of mine for longer than I invested in the space, unfortunately, but I am part of a couple different communities, but I'm very interested in more learning smart contract capabilities, especially here in Savannah being with the port, but I'm also interested in governance, things that can be done with blockchain that don't necessarily relate to finances. So giving people ownership of their own spaces, their rights. So, NFT space is blowing up. I am a holder of HBAR, have been a holder of HBAR for a while. I think they're doing some very cool things in the space. Selfishly, the conversation in Slack went, I would just love to hear how people are using smart contracts, how they have yet to evolve. So specifically, what jobs would be eliminated, what jobs would be streamlined, what things would be become trustless. That's kind of out of my space. Specifically, I'm also a participant in the Flare Finance beta, have been for a while, just on the side. I'm very interested in that community, seeing what they're doing with governance. Been involved with some other projects, but I was very excited to hear from you, Jeremy, and Rob, that you're involved with HBAR, because I have not personally talked to anybody in the HBAR community. I've only sat into a bunch of webinars, listened to the partnerships. There's a lot of heavy hitters behind HBAR. So that's kind of a high level, but I really appreciate everybody being here, and I'm looking forward to soaking up as much knowledge as your time will allow.
Great. Sounds good. And happy to be here. Yeah, no, it was one of those. I saw somebody, chime in on the Tech SAV Slack, actually chime in with some interest in the meetup and cryptocurrency, and so I jumped on it. Happy to do it, and I was happy to just pull in some of my contacts to help field some more of the deep dive type stuff. So you mentioned you've been involved for a little while, Ben. And so you said you're involved in AI machine learning. Was that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We basically aggregate inbound customer comms for companies and granularly categorize them in real time, so they don't have to rely on surveys, and that helps them prioritize product management, fixes, knowledge base, like anything you can think that really having a granular categorization of customer comms would do. Recently, we just had it updated to the newer BERT models, so if that helps. That's kind of some of the AI, but it's supervised machine learning. So we create custom hierarchies and training models for every client individually, because we found that plug and play models, like text analytics models, there's plenty of those out there that solve that like high level categorization. But if you want to really get into the voice, it has to be unique to each client. So that's where we're at right now. And we work with some bigger companies, some smaller companies. It really just, as long as they have enough inbound customer comms per month, that's really all we need. If they're catching it in any way, we can get at it.
Interesting. Yeah, I have some kind of peripheral interest in voice and AI. My wife's a dental hygienist, and we played around with the ability of dental hygienists being able to use voice response. So at any rate, so I won't go into that stuff, but yeah, definitely have some kind of peripheral interest in the voice stuff. But one of the questions, so your questions about smart contracts and cryptocurrency, one of the things that it kind of made me think of, one of the questions that it brought to my mind was, what is the what background would you say, like, so this is for either Michael or Rob, what kind of background as a computer scientist would you say really prepares you for working in blockchain and cryptocurrency? What kind of fields or what languages are the things that are really going to be or going to make you the most prepared for working in blockchain? I know that the smart contracts are written in Solidity, but that seems like that's kind of, it's a fairly new language and something that a lot of folks aren't necessarily familiar with, but a lot of folks coming from other languages that can make the transition into Solidity. So what kinds of backgrounds would you, like if you were going to hire somebody for a cryptocurrency project, what kinds of things are you looking for?
So if I was, let's assume if someone's coming to me and they're coming from outside the crypto space, but I want someone who knows enough of the science to be able to understand what's going on the quickest. So cryptography is going to be a big one. Understanding how encryption and decryption, private keys work, that's going to be a big one. But also in terms of understanding how smart contracts work, like how do I create programmable logic that runs on a blockchain? Understanding databases in terms of transaction guarantees and sharding. So knowing how to create an atomic event where this goes through step A, B, C, and D, and then it either ends at D or it rolls back to A, because the blockchain is going to usually, at least in like Ethereum smart contracts, it's one or the other. If it doesn't work out, it's going to revert. Because you don't want to be halfway through transferring money to someone and then some error shows up and then the money's half transferred. So understanding transactional guarantees, and if you really want to get into like how to make it secure, if they understand like just how to write out a proof, like literally like I know how to prove a basic concept in mathematical logic, or to even go as far as knowing how to do provable code, like having code that could be completely provable in terms of you're not going to add any results other than these 5, and I can prove it literally with like formal verification or something like that. Those are all things that would help. And those are, I'm getting very computer sciencey now, but those are the big things. But I think in general, just like being able to look at a large system, a distributed systems in general would be like a good way to prepare for this as well. And just knowing how to scale that would be a big help for understanding how this all works. And just having a very good eye for like, just understanding all the base computer science concepts would honestly help you. Like I learned computer science in college at the same time that I was learning to program on blockchains, and a lot of it overlapped where I had to go back to basics because, for example, in Solidity, up until recently, there was actually a very recent patch that came out, but up until recently, you didn't have overflow protections in Solidity. Like if you had an integer that only went to a certain number, and you got a bigger number than that, it would overflow, go back to like -1 or 0 or something, and it would just be something you'd have to be aware of being a possibility. You have to know that memory is a scarce resource, and it's a very scarce resource in blockchains too.
And so just as a side note, Michael, this was advertised as a deep dive. So don't be afraid of being too computer science and too techie. Just from Ben's question, it was one of those, I kind of, a lot of these meetups, I definitely try to tailor it back. But for any of the folks out there that aren't techies, I'm going to go ahead and, give a call myself, right? I may pop in with questions that Ben or others might go, oh, he's obviously not a developer. That's okay. But at the same time, for any of the folks that if you feel like, wow, this is moving really fast, well, this is one of those meetups that I kind of wanted to just take the chalks off and really go after the deep dive. So yeah, so don't be afraid to don't be afraid to go there.
But happy to expand on something if I say something you're not familiar with.
Right, got it. So Rob, you're a talented veteran in the software space, but not necessarily with as much time in the crypto space. What are the skills that you brought into the crypto space that have allowed you to kind of dive? I mean, pretty much I get the sense that really any development task you could probably take it on and be successful in it. But what are the things that have helped you come into the crypto space and take it by the horn, so to speak, and succeed?
I don't know. I mean, I come from I've worked in the enterprise world for just about 20 years, really, and doing all, scaling up large systems. Like one of the last things I did was taking, detector readings from trains coming by, different various detectors like microphones, or wheel impact load detectors, and then routing those messages. And blockchain is actually a really good solution for what we were doing there. But what we were doing was, determining whether or not a car needed to go into a shop for repair based on sensor readings as it traveled over it. And it would involve sending because we also did mileage messages as well. So it was about, I think, 4 million or so messages a day that were sent. And then we had to write it in such a way that it could scale up because they were continually adding more sensors and that kind of thing. But yeah, so they called them data summaries for the cars, and they were used for the industry so that you could, view statistics and data on the cars. And just having, in my world, it was, I had a lot of job experience, a lot of Oracle backend scaling up systems, doing things with messaging queues, making sure, like Michael was saying, that, transactions were atomic, that if something failed anywhere along the way, that we had to roll everything back cleanly. And it was quite a challenge to scale this up, given the constraints that I had at the time, which were, even though you had nice things out at the time, like Kafka for really fast messaging, we weren't allowed to use it. So we had to use, WebSphere MQ, and that provided quite some challenges, which we got around. We found some creative ways around it. And but I don't know. I've just had a variety of experiences. I don't have as much front end experience, so I'm kind of gaining that now as I work on Walla Wallet. That's kind of something new for me. I've always done like back end work all of my career, except at the beginning. I did some screens, but then I don't know. I mean, I have a wide range of skills and talents. I'm not as geeky as Michael is. I guess I used to be when I was young. I'm an older guy now. I'm like 50 years old, and when I was young, I would pull out the proofs, work on CFGs and whatever else. Yeah, I haven't done that in a long time. So I'm very much a hardcore. I'm the guy who gets things done. And right now, I've pretty much been a one-man team for a while. So as far as development goes.
Yeah, for
Right.
context, I hardly ever do the proofs. I usually read other people's proofs and say, oh, that looks pretty cool.
Yeah. I used to do the proofs, but that was, gosh, 16, 17, 18 years ago, something like that. So,
So I did have a question. So I hear a lot about atomic swaps. So in cryptocurrency, an atomic swap, as I understand it, please forgive me if I'm misspeaking, but essentially is swapping one currency for another, and it's a kind of an even exchange, or maybe there's some mechanism that compensates for a difference in valuation, and then an exchange can charge a spread on the difference in valuation or something to make a little bit of money on the side. But so yeah, if you could just to do a little explanation, either one of you, on atomic swaps and what an atomic transaction is, because it sounds like an atomic transaction is something in computer science that exists just as a thing, and then atomic swaps may be something that's related to an atomic transaction. Can we talk a little bit about what atomic is in the computer science world?
Yeah. So, I mean, atomic is kind of like, just like the atom works the idea is an atom is like the singular thing. Like you can't divide an atom by anything more than what it already is. The idea of an atomic thing in computer science is usually like, it's an event that is a one or, it can't be divided up. So, if I say you have to do this atomic thing, you can't just say, oh, can I do this thing and then do this the next half later? It's like, no, it's all or nothing right now. And so transactionally, like, with databases and then even with like blockchains, atomic transactions are just, you do everything that transaction requires, and it's either done or it never happened. You have those two states. It's going to either be started or finished, not have started or finished. With atomic swaps, the reason that those are interesting and they're such an area of like research and development still is like, basically, let's say a blockchain can provide its own atomic guarantees. Like Bitcoin says, I send 10 Bitcoin to you and then you receive it. And that's a transaction that is one way, happens once. There's no, there's no intermix, there's instant settlement. You immediately have those Bitcoins. And then the same thing happens on Ethereum. I send you 10 Ether, it's an atomic transaction, it happens instantly. And in fact, I could put smart contract logic into that as well to say, send him 5 Ether, and then another 2 Ether to this other contract, and then another 2 Ether to Rob or something. But even that will all happen. It'll go through several steps to do it, but it all happens within one block, and then it's finalized. if you have an atomic transaction between two different blockchains, so let's say I want to trade my Ethereum for your Bitcoin, but I want to do it so that it's an instant settlement, like it's atomic. There's no, I give you Bitcoin and then you give me the Ethereum. And let's say you give me the Bitcoin and I walk away and I haven't given you Ethereum yet. It's not atomic because I just was able to walk off. So normally we have an exchange that acts as a third party, like a Coinbase or a Binance or anyone else that just handles that for us. They say, you know what, you deposit your crypto with me and then you can trade with each other on my platform. But now they have control of the private keys. If something happened to Coinbase, you have to pay their fees, et cetera. It's like not very decentralized at that point. If you can have atomic swaps, then we can atomically say, at this agreed price, we're going to swap crypto where I'm going to get your Ethereum and you're going to get my Bitcoin. And then, it's either going to happen where we're going to complete that transaction, we're both going to get what we want, or it's not going to happen at all. And that's what atomic swaps are trying to do is allow people to trade cryptos on different blockchains, which on their own have different guarantees, and give people a singular guarantee for a swap between different assets on different chains.
Yeah, kind of like a distributed transaction, right, across databases.
Yep. Yeah, that's a perfect comparison.
Yeah.
Okay, so an atomic swap between Bitcoin and Ethereum, let's say Bitcoin's at 60,000 and Ethereum's at 3,000 per, and I want to do an exchange, or I want to do an atomic swap between so the atomic swap is basically going to be one Bitcoin or one BTC for 20 Ethereum. Is that?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay. And then so if there's and that's it. The atomic swap is the BTC for the Bitcoin for the Ethereum, and it's done, and that's the atomic swap is over.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Gotcha. Ben, any questions yet? Anything you want to throw in there? Please, we're here for you, buddy. So have at.
I am curious how it works when tokens that don't exist on a known contract, right? Like the Ethereum chain is most of the tokens are there, and then but we have different chains that are creating their own chain, and so I'm wondering how complex does it become when you want to make those swaps, right? I know there are people working on DEXs. Does that involve creating some coding to make that happen? So to bridge between the two types of chains, or how does the backend work between that? Is it something that has to be built before it can happen? Is there a way where it could be built so it could work with almost anything, or is it a middle ground?
Yeah. Okay. So there's several things to unpack there. So DEXs they don't need to have atomic swaps. So DEXs, like for example, on Ethereum, can trade Ethereum as well as Ethereum token. So they're all still on the same blockchain. So they're kind of in the same world. You do get the benefit of you're never using a third party, so everyone controls their own private keys. So it's kind of nice. It combines some elements of like it's still an atomic transaction on Ethereum. But if you wanted to involve Bitcoin, there's a couple different ways they do it. One is called wrapped Bitcoin, where you basically say, I'm going to lock up Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain and say, this Bitcoin's locked up for, let's say the next 2 weeks, no one can touch it. And then we're going to create a kind of synthetic Bitcoin coin on the Ethereum chain, and then we'll trade it like it's Bitcoin. And then whoever owns that synthetic Bitcoin at the end of that 2-week period, or maybe you can make it an infinite time period, whatever, can then destroy it on Ethereum and then redeem it for the Bitcoin that's on the actual Bitcoin blockchain. So that's what a lot of them do. Those are called hash time lock contracts on Bitcoin, where they're basically just like you have to produce a specific hash in order to unlock that contract. And the only person that can do it is the person that owns the synthetic Bitcoin on Ethereum. So that's one way they do it. And then you also have L2s where they do, or layer 2 solutions where they do the same thing. They say, we're going to lock up this crypto and you can't touch it unless you produce a specific kind of hash. And usually there's going to be like a time window to make sure that if someone is trying to steal it somehow, there's time for someone to dispute that transaction as well.
So then with something like, so let's say we go to, let's go into the Hashgraph world where we want to swap, so, and DEX, correct me if I'm wrong, but DEX is decentralized exchange, right?
Yes.
So let's take it out of our comfort zone of Bitcoin and Ethereum and go into, let's say, a hash graph for, I don't know, something else. Hash graph for what's another favorite coin, Ben? What's another project that that you're familiar with or interested in?
They've got like XRP Ledger. You've got Zinfin has their own fork of Ethereum, the Quorum fork. You've got the Codius that they're working on that's trying to solve this. I mean, Tron has their own.
Right.
thing
There's
that you could
plenty of, take your
there's a lot
pick,
of-
right? Yeah. Right. So, okay. So let's say Tron, that's a popular one. So if I want to execute an atomic swap between HBAR, the cryptocurrency of Hedera Hashgraph, and Tron, let's say, how does that, how does that work? I mean, is it essentially the same kind of thing? I don't know how you wrap, I mean, because from my understanding, it looks like all these wrapped coins are for functioning on the Ethereum blockchain. But if you wanted to swap something like Tron and HBAR, what does that look like?
So that's gonna be interesting. So you'd have to figure out what the host blockchain would be. But let's say it's going to be on HBAR. You would need a bridge at some point, and this is where a lot of work goes into, like which chain has the most bridges, for example. But basically, you build a bridge somehow between Tron and Hedera, and you'd say, okay, whenever someone wants to move Tron over to HBAR, we'll create some sort of a token on HBAR or on Hedera that represents it, and then make sure it's locked up on Tron. So you build some sort of a bridge between the two, and then use one of them to settle that transaction. And you could probably settle it over the bridge if you wanted, but like if you had like a DEX, for example, would probably be hosted on one platform or the other. There's actually a guide that I didn't know existed for Hedera. I'll post it in the chat. But it talks a little bit about atomic transaction, or an atomic swap, which I would say in this case, they're basically saying you could do an HBAR transfer and a token transfer in the same transaction, and that would be kind of like an atomic swap. It's not the same as doing it across a chain. So this atomic swap is more of like only atomic on Hedera. It's not like cross chain.
Mm-hmm.
But it is accomplishing the same thing in terms of but basically, if you get signatures from both accounts, then you can do a swap in the same transaction. And if the transaction fails, then no one's money gets moved.
Okay, so there's some kind of bridge that has to happen, and I imagine what's the complexity level there? I mean, are we talking? Yeah, just given your reaction, I guess it just kind of depends on the two chains that you're trying to get to talk to one another. Yeah.
Yep. And for example, like we've talked about Polkadot and other chains that are interoperable by default, and their whole idea is they make it so that bridges can be built far more easier on them versus other chains that are either not built with bridges in mind, and you have to kind of basically build something a little heavier to make it work. It's usually possible in most chains. It's just a question of difficulty and what kind of flexibility it offers for doing that sort of thing, as well as like how you might get the two to talk to each other. Like, for example, if you have two blockchains that are both running the Ethereum virtual machine, so they're using Solidity contracts, that bridge is going to be easier because you're kind of talking the same language versus something like Hedera and Tron. If Tron is running something totally different and Hedera is running something totally different, there's going to be a lot of translation going on between those two protocols.
So Michael, how easy is Hedera making it to build those bridges? Because I mean, I remember hearing criticism from Pablo a while back regarding that.
I think the struggle right now is that everything in Hedera is kind of bifurcated in terms of, like, you have the HCS service, the HTS service, you have, or I say service, it's Hedera consensus service and then Hedera token service, and then you have the Solidity contracts. And I think the difficulty right now with Hedera is just the fact that it's trying to do its own thing with a new protocol. So it just is harder to play nice with a protocol that's older like Ethereum and facilitate that, as well as the fact that our Solidity contracts are kind of deprecated at this point with Hedera. Yeah. So I think that's the main struggle that he was running into, but I really couldn't give specifics because I haven't had to do it myself yet.
Yeah. So there is sorry, Ben, if you stop me if something comes up, stop me because I'm just kind of taking it bit by bit here. But so the Hedera consensus service and the Hedera token service are alternatives essentially to smart contracts, as I understand it. They're a way of doing these transactions on natively on the Hedera platform without having to write the smart
Oh.
contracts. So, sorry, yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Well, I mean, with the token service, you still need like the concept of an appnet, right? To be able to create their smart contracts, right? To be able to deal with the tokens. Like if you want.
Yeah, yeah. You're either going to do it through a centralized service or an appnet or something. Yeah.
Right.
That's for the consensus service, right? So HCS, right?
Really for both, I guess, the token service and the consensus service, right?
Yeah, yeah, you would need an appnet in both regards to do like smart contract like functionality. And so like I've had this debate. I've spoken to Lehman and Mance on this before, and their perspective basically is that smart contracts that are fully on chain, which is like Solidity, where the entire transaction is atomic on chain, including state, which means I store the result of that transaction, not just the hash. So like the balance, for example, of the new token holders. Their perspective is that that will not scale long term on something like even Hashgraph, but also Ethereum. And they see the AppNet as the thing that does a lot of the busy work of the holding the data. So basically, Hedera is like, we're going to guarantee that the starting state and the ending, or basically the start and end, is verifiable. But the in between, the part where you actually do the calculations of 2 + 2 = 4, we're going to expect the AppNet to do that, and then they're just going to submit a message on Hedera to say, okay, this is complete, and here's my signature. So it's a different model, and it's actually one that they tried on Bitcoin previously, and it can scale better. It just pushes the complexity down from the blockchain to the AppNet to say the AppNet's going to deal with this instead of the blockchain. And there's pros and cons to it. It scales better for sure. But it also is more complex because you do have to make sure the AppNet is in sync with the blockchain or the hash graph in this case.
It sounds like that situation is a little bit more composable, like because it sounds like a better building block. But is that an accurate understanding? In that, because it can be, well, I'm not sure.
It's actually, it can be, but I think the struggle there is when you're leaving that open, between the start and end state, and you're saying in the middle, do it however you want. A lot of people will have different opinions on how to do it.
Right.
The one advantage you have of Solidity is that when I say, for example, if I have a smart contract that calculates that, let's say it's a financial instrument, like it's a bond that just pays out regularly, and then you want to trade it on your decentralized product, which is an exchange. So 2 totally different smart contracts written by totally different people. The advantage there is that they can make assumptions about what the other does because it's all on chain. They can say, okay, as soon as my bond is listed on your marketplace, I know that we're going to do a swap or we're going to trade, and it's going to be instant. And my code can make assumptions about your code because that, not only is the starting state and ending state on chain, but also the steps in between. So, my steps can include one of your steps in it and say, okay, and then check external contract. Is this balance correct? Great. Come back to contract, complete state. So you can do that in Ethereum. That's one of the reasons that DeFi is so hot, is because you're not just using one product, you're using a bunch of products that are all plugged together, and which is really kind of cool. And with Hedera, if you're going to have people do that, then they need to agree on how that middle state is solved and have ways to communicate that to each other. So that's where AppNets become important, because you're going to need an AppNet that can either an AppNet that supports multiple different people and multiple different products all talking to each other, or AppNets that can also talk to each other. So one of those two.
Gotcha. Ben,
It seems like the
anything?
AppNets are the area that I've not heard a lot about, but are much more critical to real world applications. Let's say like logistics, right? Where it's not just money, it's also like product has to be moved, and it's slower in time. So there would be, probably locked up on both ends, but unless everybody's dealing with the same blockchain, which makes it easier. But, if as things become global, it would come down to who's developing the AppNets, how much do we trust the people developing the AppNets, and how are those either audited, or basically to get the people who are sending the stuff and the money who don't understand the technology as well, but want to use it for the obvious benefits. Like, how does that work out in real world, or is it working out in real world right now?
Yeah, that's a big open question actually with Hedera. We're actually in a process where there's a lot of discussions around appnets, where people are building appnets right now. We know that a lot of corporate members are building appnets, so some of the biggest partners we know, like we ourselves, some of us here have been trying to work on like coming up with proposals for how do we standardize appnets so that we know how everyone's communicating with one another. So that's, and we've even talked about creating appnets that are effectively Ethereum, either Ethereum or other blockchain protocols running on Hedera. It's still, so they're still using like the, you know, the Ethereum virtual machine is still going to do the middle processing, but the end state then it gets stored on the consensus service so that the main blockchain can scale better, but we can still use smart contracts from Ethereum in a more closed loop. So they're all still open discussions on how to do that best. And I think the one downside with Hedera right now is that because we have a lot of corporate members, they're still kind of, they're very conservative in terms of what they publicly disclose about what they're up to. So we've been told that there's a lot going on with what they're doing with appnets, but we haven't got to quite see it yet in the same way we get to see it on Ethereum, because everyone on Ethereum is just completely open source and open about what they're doing. So it seems like there is a lot of activity with appnets and Hedera, and we've, you know, we ourselves like been working on that, and we've talked to Hedera directly, and they know it's very important. But because it's like, I would say it's new within the last year, like the importance of appnets has slowly become more understood. Like people that suddenly dive into Hedera deeper realize, oh, appnets is where things are. Now that's where a lot of people are slowly coming to and starting to just now talk about, okay, how do we all do appnets in a way that works most appropriately? And Hedera themselves are trying to help support that as well. But there's just, it's one of those big open questions on how to do it best. And so I think their approach right now is to let a lot of people try different things and then see if the community moves towards that.
So are the companies being secretive because they don't want others to figure out the weak spots before they have sussed it out? Or is it just because they don't want anyone to know what they're up to in general, like corporations, and is what I'm referencing?
I think it's mostly the second part. That's my inclination. As in, they just do it as like basically like, and this is the way like a consulting at a few corporations, including on blockchain projects. They usually don't talk about their blockchain projects until they have a big win associated with it. Like, oh, we did something really cool. We just shipped something across the globe and it had a blockchain sticker on it or something like that. Like they want to win, so they won't typically have active conversations with larger communities outside of their company. I think they do provide updates to some of the people within Hedera, but there's NDAs in place that mean it doesn't like filter out very commonly. So I think it's one of those things where I think once it becomes really established, we're going to start hearing about it, but we don't get to hear it until it's, you know, we typically don't hear as much when it's a work in progress from the corporate perspective.
Seems like that really handicaps development, especially for these appnets.
A little bit, and we've been working on that. I think Hedera's recognized it, and they are trying to build some communities that are going to have more active discussions on this. They have a new HIT process, which is kind of like the Ethereum request for proposal process to get people to discuss this more out in the open. And so I think that's, if they can get that rolling where they actually have some of their corporate members coming out and talking about, oh yeah, this is what we're doing, then I think they could definitely see some better traction. So it's one of those things where because what Hedera is trying to do is they're trying to go after enterprise more explicitly than Ethereum. Which comes with new challenges, but it also means that if you can get at least a few corporate members using this and standardizing this amongst themselves, then that becomes a big flag to plant. The problem is that no one sees the flag until they finally decide to reveal it. So we've been actively asking, hey, is there a way where we can get a little sneak peek on what we might be able to standardize in the rest of the community?
It's been challenging for me too, because Hedera is really focused on B2B rather than B2C, and you know, for Walla Wallet, you know, we have our own needs, and they don't really have a fully supported working SDK for iOS, for example. You know, we're running a hacked version of JavaScript. We ran that for a while. I spent quite a bit of time porting the Golang SDK so that I could run that on the iOS now. So I use the same SDK on both iOS and Android, you know, just for maintenance to make that easier. But you know, still, that means I have to write all the bridge code to send these nasty, you know, data structures over, you know, back and forth. And it's awful. I don't want to have to do that. And they still don't have their React Native example working. They claim it works, but me and Shiva from Resolute weren't able to get it to work. And so we have a defect that we're trying to get them to fix that. And that was open last December. So, you know, they're so focused on the B2B, they don't seem to really care about the mobile space right now. So, and, for the kinds of stuff that Jeremy and I want to do, that's really we want to build out, more token related services and features that people can actually use, right?
I'd like to think that it's not so much they don't care as so much as they're, I don't want to say not aware of, but not aware of the level of importance. I'd like to give, I'd like to say that it's really more, not that they don't care, but we've had some opportunities to, to have some discussions with the folks at Hedera, and I think that they took the issue in earnest, right? They realized that there needs to be a little bit more front facing and kind of I don't want to call it hand holding, but just direct interface with the smaller companies, between the smaller companies and the council, such that these changes, like Ben was pointing out, are not crippling and really holding us back. It has been a challenge. I 100% agree with Rob, because there have been issues that have come out.
Not just for us, but for other companies like Tune.fm too,
Absolutely.
they
Yeah.
got hit pretty hard, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. The whole, the smart contracts have been kind of a little bit of a back and forth game in Hedera. So there's been some issues that have come out of that. And so the one that Rob's talking, I don't know how familiar you are, Ben, with some of the projects that have been, some of the earlier projects, kind of flagship projects that have been out on Hedera, but one of them was Tune.fm, or is Tune.fm, excuse me. That's a music streaming app where essentially the tagline is that when the music is played, the artist gets paid. So it's a streaming micropayment service to musicians all over the world that upload their music, and then when it's streamed, they get paid directly. So they had a smart contract implementation that wound up essentially becoming useless, because there was a state limit size that was imposed on the smart contracts in Hedera that wound up breaking their application. And they spent a long period of time developing another like kind of a what are we, sharded smart contract
yeah.
implementation, is that right? To kind of
Exactly, yeah.
overcome the limit of the state size. And then after the
Yeah, they
months and
did it,
months
they
of
got it
developing
working.
that, they got it, right, got it working. And then Hedera came along with the Hedera token service, which kind of rendered all of that work on the sharded smart contracts useless, right? So yes, Ben, you're absolutely correct. There are issues. I would like to say that some of the issues are, due to a new platform, new technology. We're all kind of cutting our teeth and figuring out the best, especially when you're dealing with what Hedera is doing, which is this kind of quasi corporate, quasi decentralized platform. They have their own unique challenges to address, right? It's one thing, on one hand, you've got the Ethereum, which is totally open source. And then you've got, corporate blockchains that are completely closed off. And then you've got Hedera somewhere in the middle. So I think part of it for them is just figuring out, how to address the issues and how to do what it is that they want to do.
That's brutal.
It can be. It can be.
It's interesting too, because Rob, when you said B2B, are you speaking mainly of enterprise B2B?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. Because when I think of B2B, there's a lot of small businesses who I think could benefit from, this type of technology, but
I agree.
they won't be able to use it until it's more of a, for lack of a better word, plug and play.
Yeah.
Most small business owners aren't going to have the technical know-how
That's
of
right.
how to get this happening, but it
And
seems like
honestly,
that's missing.
yeah, I agree. That's honestly who I'm interested in helping. I'd like to help the small businesses,
And I think Hedera realizes that. Like I was mentioning, there's been some conversations recently where I genuinely got the sense that that message was heard loud and clear, and that plug and play for the smaller shops, will be taken seriously going forward. I think that, it's hard. They've got to cater to the big dogs too. So you've got your Googles and your IBMs that have their needs. Then you've got the little guys down on the bottom that have their needs, and finding the way to balance the two is, probably pretty challenging. But yeah, I'm hopeful though.
Does it become more complex, the problems that the Hedera has to focus on with the enterprise customers? It seems like from the it's like B2C or the smaller businesses, what their use cases would be much more limited initially. But maybe I'm completely missing like where the things start to break. It's like the enterprise customers won't talk to the other enterprise customers because they have NDAs with Hedera, and then they don't want to have an NDA with, you know, a competitor who's on the same network. So we don't want to say what they're doing, or is the complexity just bigger businesses have bigger types of communications that have to happen with data across different places that smaller players wouldn't have?
I think from my perspective, it's just because Hedera is made up of a council of these large organizations, they get priority in everything that's done, right? And so, I mean, I remember hearing that, you know, developers would put off certain tasks because they had to focus on things that the Hedera council wanted to get done, right? And so that's kind of the situation that I'm in. You know, I've been waiting for a working JavaScript SDK for iOS that I could use, or any supported working SDK there, but it didn't come. And they said that they were having a real trouble, you know, migrating it, so they put it on the shelf. But just the other week they had a breakthrough, and it still doesn't work, but they got over the hardest part of the challenge. And I found one of the other bugs there, and I looked at it and I came up with a fix for it, but there was another one behind it. And I said, look, guys, I really need this, you know, working. I can't be going through all of this myself. And so it's just, I think it's just a matter of, you know, resources and priorities.
Yeah, and I think to answer your question around like what enterprise needs are different, I think they're used to definitely having a lot more in-house. So doing customized builds and using Hedera as an integration point for that is more their focus, versus a more, like you said, plug and play solution that has a lot more added in, like an AppNet that might be more modular and easier to stand up quickly, like that sort of thing. Enterprises are building most of that custom because they have such specific requirements. So I do think that's why it's not getting as much focus when it would be a big impact on the consumer side. And even for small businesses that wouldn't obviously be custom making everything. They would prefer something that is like a QuickBooks or something that just spins up and works.
Yep.
So there's a bunch of different, and by the way, so there's a bunch of different smart contracts that are out there. Just real quick, and by the way, Ben, please feel free to jump in, and I'm just kind of throwing out questions that I kind of pre-baked. So if there's anything on your mind, by all means, jump in there. But I was curious about the different ERCs, the ERC20s, the 721s, the 420s, whatever the heck is out there. What are these different ERCs, and like, are they? I'm guessing that they're capable of different things, but what's the deal with the different types of smart contracts?
Yeah, so these are mostly standards around how to do something specific. And ERCs can be many different things. They can also be Ethereum proposals to the protocol. So sometimes they're changing the protocol, sometimes they're proposing a standard for smart contracts. It can depend. But
okay,
I mean, the most famous standard is, of course, ERC20. And that means that's just a fungible token. And it literally says is, here's an interface. Here's a function called balance. Here's a function called transfer. Here's a function called owner of, and all these different pieces where if I create an ERC20 token, as many people have, I don't have to worry about saying, okay, I created a token. Now I have to create a wallet, and now I have to create a crowd sale application and all these different things. If I have an ERC20 wallet, or I'm sorry, ERC20 token, I can use any ERC20 wallet that's already out there, like my Ether wallet and many others, and it just works. And so people that held a bunch of tokens in one wallet can just add one more token to that wallet, and they don't really have to do anything beyond pointing it to where the contract is and saying that's an ERC20 token and I want to put it in my wallet. So I'll just do a transfer using the transfer token, and that's it. So that's essentially what those ERC20 standards enable. And so like the next example would be ERC 721, which was the NFT. So a non-fungible token that just says, let's add on a few more functions for making it unique, giving it a unique ID, giving it some metadata so we can link it to a picture of a cat or whatever we want it to represent ownership of. And then there's several other standards that are on work. So digital identity, a few other things like that. So that's generally what it is. ERC20 means I'm just following a certain standard that I'm expecting everyone else to follow.
Okay. So I noticed, like, when I go, like, if I go on CoinMarketCap and I'm looking around at a bunch of these different tokens, I'm aware that some of the tokens are these Ethereum. They're the ERC20 tokens. Because I've noticed that, like, if I go to the specific coin, this is an example. I think Pancake Swap, right?
Yeah.
if I go to PancakeSwap and I click on that in CoinMarketCap, when it takes me to the little graph of the history of PancakeSwap and the sites and all that, I noticed that there's a little, like what looks like a little public or a little key, some kind of little public address with the little MetaMask symbol, the little fox there.
Yeah.
So is that what is that? When I'm looking at, like, what is that address and the little what is that telling me about PancakeSwap?
It's basically saying I can add this to my wallet. So you can say, hey, I want to recognize this as a token. I want to see my wallet. If you don't own any tokens in your wallet at that point, it just says 0. But then you could tell someone, hey, send me some PancakeSwap, and it'll show up. And PancakeSwap, actually, funny enough, they're on Binance Smart Chain, so they're not technically on Ethereum, but it works exactly the same way. Like it's literally a copy and paste of Ethereum. So same exact structure. They're using the same exact standards. They've just basically ripped off everything Ethereum already had.
Wow.
And I'll give you a plug. I got to do a plug real quick because it doesn't. I would hate not to. So the company I'm working for right now, Open Zeppelin, actually creates the standards. I'm sorry, we don't create the standards. We implement the standards and then provide it as a common library. So I would say 99% of the tokens out there, including, I'm sure, by PancakeSwap, uses Open Zeppelin code. Let me see if I can find the repo real quick. But basically, like if you're saying, I want to use ERC20, but instead of writing the whole contract from scratch, like in terms of the logic, because it's all the same. It's the same contract every time. I can just use this existing contract that's already been audited. It's already secure. So for example, if I wanted to use a smart contract, I could like, here's the ERC20 we have. And we not only provide ERC20, but we provide a bunch of extra stuff on top. So if you want it to be burnable or mintable, or allow, provide time locks, like little features on top of ERC20, we also provide a lot of those. So that's like an example. But like the code in there is like that code is what most people use in the space, just as a general standard. So we just follow the ERC20 standard. We don't set it, but we implement it. And then people are like, well, this is audited code, so I might as well use this instead of trying to write it myself and introduce a bug somewhere.
Got it. So now, so Binance, is it what, Binance Smart Chain? Is that the correct term there, or the name for it?
Yeah.
So is that essentially, is that just a clone then? Is that an Ethereum clone?
Yeah, it's literally Ethereum with, it basically takes the EVM Ethereum, the Geth nodes, and then it just modifies them to say, we're going to just run it with, instead of a proof of work chain, which is where people are mining and anyone can run a node, we're just going to say there's like 20 or 30 validator nodes. And I think they might stake their Binance coin or something on it. But basically it's like we have 20 nodes. It's kind of similar to Hedera in that sense. So we just have 20 trusted nodes. They're going to run the network. We're going to reduce fees because we have less nodes running. And then this is like the environment in which they could use it for cheaper fees. Funny enough, they eventually run into bottlenecks there as well. Like everyone runs into the bottlenecks eventually because it's computation just has like when it's just distributed system, you're going to run out of space eventually. So sharding comes in there, but basically, yeah, it's a copy paste of Ethereum. It runs the same way except for the way the nodes are structured, and you can basically you can move anything currently running on Ethereum to Binance. So PancakeSwap is also a fork of Uniswap, which is another, which is a crypto exchange built on Ethereum, and they just took the code, forked it, and put it on Binance and called it PancakeSwap. So yeah, that's basically it's all forked off of Ethereum. Just running in a different environment with a different token underlying the system. So you're paying fees in Binance instead of Ethereum.
Right.
So does that allow, say somebody who's working on Binance Smart Chain, right? They've solved a problem that fixes something for Ethereum because of the basically clones of each other. Do the fixes work on both sides? So say like people who are working on the EVM side, they say, oh, wow, this is working, fix something with Binance. Like, why don't we just take it? And I don't know if you would audit that or how that works, but does it go back and forth because they're clones of each other?
It certainly could. We haven't seen that as much because at least the sentiment in the space, and granted, this is coming from someone who works mostly in the Ethereum space. So it's this particular kind of sentiment, but usually it's like, oh, they're too far behind because we're on version 3 and they're still trying to port over version 2, for example. But yes, if Binance came up with a really good solution for their system, we could basically, assuming it wasn't doing something really specific that like Binance had changed, it would run using the same Solidity code over on main chain Ethereum. And that's a nice thing about a lot of blockchains that support Ethereum now. So, I mean, technically Hedera does to a limited extent, and they might do so again through an AppNet. And then many other blockchains are doing the same, where I think like Ethereum is, like it or not, like for example, MS-DOS is god awful engineering as from a computer science perspective. That's what underpins Microsoft Windows. But it has so much traction and got so much traction in the beginning that everyone used it. And it's like, okay, if you're not running Windows, you're not doing a real application that's going to have users. And even today, like, yeah, I mean, that's just, you're going to have something ported to Windows at some point. And I feel like that's the same thing we're seeing for Ethereum. And Ethereum has technical challenges just by the fact it was first, and that comes with some legacy bloat. But they're working on it, they're improving it, and I think over time it's going to be like things are going to be written in mostly Solidity and Ethereum for most, like at least in the finance space, it's definitely going to be that. Maybe other industries like supply chain evolve elsewhere on Fabric or Hedera, but I think for financial stuff, we're going to see a lot of stuff mostly in Solidity and Ethereum. And what other chains like Hedera and others will do is they'll just try to accommodate Ethereum as much as possible, because then they kind of get all this code for free. You know, suddenly I have a working exchange because I ported it over from Ethereum, and I have working decentralized, I have working derivatives, I have working bonds, I have like an entire financial system that worked on Ethereum and now works here. It's basically free, so why not?
So Michael, what about things like the CBDCs that Hedera is working on, right? I mean, is Ethereum a good fit for that now?
That's a good question, and it's a question of what they want to accomplish with the CDC. I think like definitely they're going to want more control over it. Like I know that, and it makes sense from Hedera's perspective to say we obviously are, under tighter control with the nodes that we run. But at the same time, it's also going to be harder to get traction from a lot of other institutions, including large institutions like Microsoft and JP Morgan and Ernst & Young that are all very focused on Ethereum now, because they're going to want to do their own thing with stuff they've already built on Ethereum. So I feel like maybe there's going to be some sort of atomic swap, or there's going to be some sort of bridge between these ecosystems. But I think they're going to, I don't know. Everyone's saying they're working on CDCs. Like, Ethereum, a Consensus, which is a big Ethereum company, says they're working on CDCs too. So everyone's saying that now. And I think the central banks are trialing multiple things and trying multiple things out. So I don't know what would win out in the end, but I think it's going to be something where like the government controls the supply, obviously. But it might be on a platform where it can interact with other exchanges and other assets, such as Ethereum and Bitcoin and Hedera. And it's just going to be one more thing out there in Ether, like Ether as in the internet, not Ethereum, that can just be interacting with different assets and exchanges. That's the way I think it's going to play out. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope they don't say let's ban everything and only use a CDC.
I mean, I was kind of wondering if the CBDCs were going to run on their own, like Swirls, for example, would license, to the government, right? And they would run their own network of nodes. And then maybe the public Hedera network would be used to atomic swap, between that for like foreign currencies that might be running on other private, chains as well, but maybe connected via the public Hedera Hashgraph. I mean, that would be one way to do it, right? You could come up with an architecture like that.
Yeah, and I would not be surprised if that's one of their why they're so focused on enterprise things like that.
I would imagine that that's probably something they're
fish.
shooting for, because it would make sense to do that given the ABFT security guarantees that they have and the speed and that Hedera has to offer. I mean, how far away is Ethereum from being that secure? And I mean, Ethereum is still probabilistic consensus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say it is probabilistic consensus, but in terms of security, that's like it's a hard question to answer. And I would say they're going to have finality where it's not probabilistic because of proof of stake soon. So in the next 1 to 2 years, they will have something that's equivalent to immediate finality on a transaction. And so, and the probabilistic one is kind of like, it's like, yeah, that's a kind of a problem if you want an absolute guarantee, but it's like it's like 0.00001% like probability of something going back, as in it's literally only happened once in the history of the chain. So it's like, but yeah, I can imagine a central banker would be like, I don't like that 0.00001%. So I'm sure that they would be competing on that. So, but I think Ethereum is in a different place where they're basically, Hedera is doing, they have a lighter chain, but it's a very fast chain. It's a lean, it's kind of lean and mean. Ethereum's like, you can do anything on our chain, but it's a little bit slow because you can do anything on our chain. And I think Ethereum is eventually going to get closer to that by doing sharding, by introducing layer 2s, which are kind of like appnets in a way. They're kind of just pushing it down to another layer. So I think it's interesting. I see Ethereum starting out with this all-in-one approach of a big virtual machine running on a blockchain, and then slowly moving to the point where they're putting more things on different layers and sharding it and making it more scalable by pushing things off that main layer onto other things. And then Hedera is coming from the other direction where they're saying we have a really lean, mean chain, but we're adding more features to it and getting closer with appnets still taking the brunt of it, but needing to be more standardized and needing to do things like Ethereum smart contracts to get more traction. So they're kind of like, I see them moving to the same point in the middle where they both want a sweet spot of very functional, but also very scalable.
Right, because the cost of truth is real, right? No
Mhm.
matter which way you slice it, the cost of truth is real. And so you can come at it from one direction, or you can come at it from another direction, but it's like at some point there is like a finite limit, right? I mean, just I don't know. There's at some point you make sacrifices on one end to gain things on the other end, or vice versa. So Michael, you brought up, you mentioned that Ethereum is going towards the proof of stake model. I did have a question come in about about staking on HBAR, and it was particularly a question about staking HBAR on Walla Wallet. But can we talk just? And I know it's at the top of the hour, so by the way, it's past the top of the hour. So if any folks have got to cut out, Michael, I appreciate you dropping in. You've given us your time here, and I can't thank you enough. But so if you got to get going, just let us know.
I'll do this question. That sounds good.
We'll wrap it up. But yeah, so if you could talk a little bit about proof of stake. Proof of stake is coming to HBAR. We're not exactly sure when. Of course, really Walla Wallet. I mean, if it has anything to do with HBAR, we plan on being right there. So if you can stake your HBAR, you can do it with Walla Wallet whenever that comes down the pike. But we're not sure exactly when. As far as I know, it's not officially on the roadmap, even though, I mean, it is one of those imminent features, but not currently on the roadmap. So,
But according
what
to
is?
Jordan, it showed up in an API, right?
Ooh, okay, it's working on it.
He posted a tweet and a little while ago, maybe 2 weeks ago or so now, where he pointed out that there was some staking code notice. It was Cooper who did that. It was either Cooper or Jordan. One of the two posted that. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm not on Twitter anymore because I got censored. I got banned. So if you wonder why Ledger Realm is not tweeting or I'm not tweeting there, that's why.
Interesting. Okay, but I'm sorry. What was the question?
Well, I guess first off, what is a staking? There's proof of work, there's proof of stake. Without going into too much of proof of stake, just basically, what is proof of stake? What is that going to mean for Hedera and HBAR? And then so you could just and I guess since we're talking about Ethereum, what does that mean for Ethereum too? But leading into what does that mean for Hedera and HBAR?
All right, yeah. So the proof of work / proof of stake model is a security model that just says the way we make sure this system is secure is that we make sure that anyone who's going to participate as a node, like a node that validates blocks or validates transactions, will act honestly. And we're going to do that by requiring them to put something up. So it's kind of like a bond, a bond you would put on for a contractor that does work on your house or something. But it can be compared to with proof of work. It's basically like you're going to have to do some work to actually earn the right to validate transactions, and that's what miners do. They literally just process random numbers. They're literally trying to guess a random number, which is a lot of work for them computationally to earn the right to mine a block, which also earns them Bitcoin, which is why they're incentivized to do that work. With proof of stake, the idea is, okay, we don't want to waste computation needlessly any longer, especially environmental impact, et cetera, lots of energy, blah, blah, blah. Because all that energy, like all the Bitcoin energy you hear about, that's not because it is inefficient. Like that's not what they're doing to validate transactions. That's what people are doing to prove that they are a good actor that is worthy of validating transactions. Because anyone who would put in that much effort to mine a Bitcoin block probably doesn't want to destroy it, because their value, they're going to get their money back in the Bitcoin they mine. And if they undermine Bitcoin, their Bitcoin goes down. So it's like they're incentivized to protect the system that they are now a big part of. So proof of stake says, let's take that same philosophy, and let's say instead of earning Bitcoin by putting up a lot of computation, you're going to take your existing crypto, which in the case of Ethereum is just going to be your Ethereum, and you're going to stake it. You're going to say, I'm going to take 30 ETH or something like it. I'm going to lock it up in a contract and run a node. And if I at any point try to process invalid transactions on my node, if I try to cheat, then my stake will be slashed. I will lose my stake, and I will not be happy. And you will probably lose more than what you were trying to steal. So that's the idea of proof of stake. It says, okay, if we're trying to move away from proof of work, but we need something to secure the network to make sure nodes act honestly, and we're just going to have them put up a stake and use that as a way to to basically decide who gets to run a node. So for Hedera, that's going to be interesting, because they already have a model where their security model is not really about either proof of stake or proof of work. It's about council members, and saying this council member, by virtue of their brand and their prestige and the fact that they're just a large corporation that is interested in this technology and wants to promote it, is going to be a governing council member, and they're going to run a node. And that's actually called a proof of authority network. Just like Binance is a proof of authority network, it basically says only authoritative nodes will run only authoritative parties will run nodes, and we're assuming that by that authority they are going to act honestly, or that at least a plurality, like a large majority of the nodes will act honestly. As in, even if there's a few bad eggs, the rest will outvote them in any case. So the question then, I guess, is with Hedera, when they introduce proof of stake, is that going to be something that council members will do? So they basically say a council member will then stake. And then they open it up. They say node membership is no longer just people on the council. It is now anyone who has enough HBAR that they can then stake it and run a node. That's a good question. I don't know if that's what they're going to do, or maybe it's going to be a delegated proof of stake model, which says that only council members run the nodes, but you can delegate your stake to a specific council member and earn interest from your stake. To say, if I give you $1,000, oh, and I should have mentioned, proof of work gives you a percentage payout of what you've staked. So if I'm staking like $100 worth of Ethereum with a 5% payout, then I'll earn $5 a year by staking that Ethereum. So the idea is that, like, especially if you're bullish on crypto and you're like, I want to sit on my Ethereum and hodl, you can earn interest on your hodl. And the same thing would apply to HBAR, which would be very interesting, because now people can earn interest on their HBAR instead of just sitting on it.
Right. So they've said, so they do, the path to decentralization states that the Hedera nodes will be released or available to the public to run at some point in the future. I'm curious to see how so there's a lot of question marks that pop up in my mind about the staking model with Hedera, because there is no slashing with Hedera, right? So in what way the tokens add weight to the validator nodes is interesting. Yeah. But I think I'll probably say, unless there are any particular questions from the audience on that, I'll leave the more detailed discussion until next time, because I feel like that's a pretty big one. I'm happy to go down that path, but given that it's 7:15, starting to get late, I probably need to start cooking dinner for the family and everything. Yeah, I'll hold off on that unless there's any specific desire to go down that path. I'm happy to go there.
Just really quick, my short guess is that if instead of like destroying the HBAR, they just reallocate it back to the treasury.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, well, but
I remember reading that they weren't going to penalize the nodes though.
Right. That's the idea that if that there will be essentially no penalty to the stakers, which kind of makes it, well then, I don't know. I guess I can see you've got some interest in the network because you hold HBAR that has a value, and you're going to add weight. I guess it's like a weighting. It's consensus by weight. Right. So a node that has more HBAR stake to it will have more weight in the consensus than others. That's the That's kind of the clincher there.
Hmm.
But as to Max's question about will Walla Wallet offer that? Well, as long as Walla Wallet is still around and HBAR is and staking of HBAR is a thing, then you will be able to do it with you'll be able to do it with Walla Wallet. Don't
Yeah,
have any kind of time frame on that one, but we'll be right there all the way.
yeah, we're working through some tech debt right now. We're going to have some other releases in a couple of weeks, hopefully. And like one of the things we're adding is Face ID for Android, which is sorely wanted. So yeah.
Right. Face ID for Android, multiple language support,
Right.
some stability issues that we want to work out.
Yeah.
So, and then after that, at some point in the near future, we'll be shifting gears to
Token.
supporting the Hedera token service. But yeah, we've got a couple of things that we want to clean up in the meantime. But yep, we'll be there all the way. So, Ben, is there anything else that you'd like to add or ask before we wrap this one up?
I just want to say thank you because I have more questions than I started with, which is awesome.
Good.
But yeah, I thank everybody for your time, your expertise. This was very huge. I'd say like the next thing I would be curious about is like over ledgers, over ledgers versus parachains and things like that. But yes.
Nice. Okay,
Yeah.
well, cool. So we do this every first Monday of the month. And so yeah, every first Monday of the month at 6 p.m. we have the Creative Coast Hedera Hashgraph Savannah Meetup. So again, want to just throw another shout out to Creative Coast, Caitlin and Jen for keeping this ship afloat, making sure that there's a place for us to get together in Savannah and talk shop like this. Many thanks. They've been there with me really since I started my journey in this crazy entrepreneur world. So many thanks to the folks over at Creative Coast, and we'll be back here next month at 6 p.m. And any of you, so if you want to stay up, if you want to keep up with any of the stuff that Ledgerama is doing, you can reach out to us at info@ledgerama.com, info@wallawallet.com. We're on Twitter at Walla Wallet. We're on LinkedIn at Ledgerama. So there's lots of ways you can reach out to us. Ben, if you have any other questions for us, or if you want to maybe recommend any guests for next time, or if you have any, like I said, so hopefully the folks that are here will join us again next month when we do this on the first Monday of the month at 6 p.m. Eastern.